All right, welcome back, everyone. We're diving into some serious hip-hop history today with an artist spotlight on Snoop Dogg's latest album, Missionary.
Oh, yeah, this one's got everyone talking.
For good reason. I mean, it's produced by Dr. Dre.
The one and only.
It's their first full album together since the iconic Doggystyle.
Which, let's be real, was over 30 years ago.
Yeah, 1993. So can they recapture that same magic after all this time? That's the big question, right?
Absolutely.
We've got a whole stack of reviews, fan reactions, even some heated Reddit debates to sort through.
Buckle up.
It's going to be good.
You know, it's funny how every single review, every comment section I've seen always comes back to Doggystyle.
Right. Like, is Missionary the new Doggystyle?
Mm-hmm.
But why is that album benchmark? I mean, come on. Doggystyle was ages ago.
Well, you have to remember that Doggystyle wasn't just an album. It was a cultural phenomenon. It completely redefined West Coast gangsta rap, made Snoop and Dre superstars, and ignited a ton of controversy.
Oh, absolutely. Like, remember that Newsweek cover with Snoop? When is rap too violent? The whole world was talking about it.
Exactly. And what's so interesting is that Doggystyle, in a way, actually broadened the appeal of gangsta rap. Rolling Stone made this point that Dre and Snoop brought these big, infectious hooks and melodies.
You could sing along to it.
Yeah, it was catchy and made it appeal to a much wider audience.
Even with those hardcore lyrics, yeah.
It became about the music, not just the violence.
That's really interesting. Like, you think about Gin and Juice. Yeah, the lyrics are about partying hard, but the production, the vibe, it's just fun.
It is, and you can really see how that influence went beyond just the lyrics themselves.
For sure. It makes you wonder, though, did they intentionally set out to kind of shift the direction of gangster rap with Doggystyle? Or was it just a happy accident?
It's a great question. And either way, it shows just how much impact they had on hip-hop as a whole.
No doubt. Okay, so that Doggystyle legacy is definitely hanging over Missionary. Mm-hmm. But let's get into the music itself. Dr. Dre's back producing, so of course everyone's got opinions on the sound. What's the general consensus?
Well, everyone seems to agree that the production quality is super high, very polished, very detailed.
Very Dre, you could say.
Exactly. But that's where the opinions start to split.
Ooh, I love a good debate. Tell me more. What are people saying?
So some critics are saying it's almost too polished, like it lacks that rawness, that gritty West Coast sound from their earlier work. It's missing that in-your-face energy.
Okay, I could see that.
But then you've got some people, especially over on Reddit, who are actually comparing it to, get this, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Wait, Earth, Wind, and Fire, that's not what I was expecting at all.
Yeah, it's a wild comparison. So is Dre a sonic god, or has he gone full-on smooth jazz? It's up for debate.
I love it. Well, I think it's important to remember that Dre's sound hasn't stayed the same, right? It's evolved over time.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the Chronic 2001 Compton. Each one has a different feel.
He's constantly experimenting, refining his sound.
You can't expect even a legendary producer like Dre to stay in the same lane forever, right?
Exactly. And you know, this is a good point for all of us listening. Musical tastes change, artists evolve, even our own preferences shift over time. So is this just a natural evolution for Dre, or is he out of touch with what made him famous? That's for each listener to decide. It's something to think about.
I love that. Okay, so let's move on to Snoop himself.
Yeah.
How's he sounding on Missionary? Has his style evolved as well?
You know, actually, Snoop's performance is where some of the biggest criticisms come in. Some reviewers found his verses kind of safe, you know, sticking to the same theme.
The weed, the women.
Exactly, that West Coast lifestyle, without really pushing his lyrical boundaries.
But isn't that kind of Snoop's thing? That laid-back, effortless, cool? I mean, he's built a whole career on that.
That's true, and to be fair, there are tons of fans, especially on Reddit, who absolutely love his verses on this album. They're praising his flow, the wordplay. Saying
he sounds as smooth and charismatic as ever.
Yeah, exactly.
So is it a matter of consistency versus getting stale? Like, is it enough to just do what you do well? Or do artists always need to be reinventing themselves?
That's a tough question, and here's where things get even more interesting. Snoop has actually admitted to using ghostwriters in the past.
Wait, seriously? I had no idea.
Yeah, it throws a whole new wrench into how we view his artistry, right?
For sure. I mean, now we're not just talking about whether he's evolving his style, but also how much he's actually writing his own lyrics.
Right. It raises a big question for the listener. Does an artist have to constantly reinvent themselves to stay relevant? Or can just being really good at your signature style be enough?
That's a good point. Okay, so we've talked about Snoop, we've talked about Dre, but we can't forget the guest features. Dre always loves bringing in other artists to work with Snoop. What's the lineup looking like on Missionary?
Well, it's a pretty diverse group on this one. You've got some classic hip-hop names, of course. Eminem, 50 Cent, Method Man.
The usual suspects.
But then there's some choices that are definitely raising eyebrows.
Okay, now you got me curious. Spill the tea. Who are these surprise guests?
Well, one collaboration that's getting almost universal praise is Anderson Paak on the track City of Angels.
Oh, I love Anderson Paak.
His voice just fits so well with that classic Dre production.
Smooth, soulful.
It's a match made in heaven. But you mentioned some less expected features. Let's just say the Sting collaboration has sparked some lively discussion, shall we say.
Wait, Sting as in Sting from the Police.
Yep, the one and only. And yeah, it's about as unexpected as it sounds. Some people are into it, digging the genre-bending vibe, but others are just confused.
Wow, okay, that's a curveball. So you've got everything from old school hip-hop legends to, well, Sting. Is there some kind of strategy behind Dre's guest choices, do you think?
I think there are a couple of things going on. First, Dre has always used guest features to kind of push Snoop out of his comfort zone, to try different sounds and styles.
That makes sense.
And second, let's not forget, this is Dr. Dre we're talking about. He's a master at creating those moments, sparking conversation, generating hype.
Oh, for sure. Those unexpected features definitely get people talking.
Yeah.
It's a bold move. What do you think, though? Do the guest appearances add to the album, or do they distract from what Snoop and Dre are trying to do?
It's a great question, and ultimately it's really a matter of taste. Do the features complement the album's overall vibe, or do they take you out of the experience? That's for each listener to decide.
I like that. Okay, so for our last point, let's zoom out a bit. What's the overall goal of Missionary? What are Snoop and Dre trying to say with this album?
Well, you can't ignore that title, Missionary, and the fact that they're calling it a spiritual successor to Doggystyle 31 years later. There's a lot of nostalgia at play here.
For sure. And even the music itself, there are those nods to that classic West Coast sound, the sampling, the lyrics, the vibe. It all kind of takes you back to that era.
Exactly. I think they're creating this conversation between their past selves and who they are now. They're acknowledging their legacy while showing how they've grown as artists.
That's a great way to put it. But of course, with nostalgia comes the risk of turning off listeners who weren't around for that golden era, or people who just aren't into revisiting the past. And we saw some of that in the Reddit threads.
Absolutely, yeah. Some find that nostalgia heartwarming, a celebration of their favorite music, but others just think it's tired, lazy, or out of touch.
Right. And that's the challenge with Missionary, isn't it? Can you enjoy an album that relies so heavily on nostalgia, even if it's not breaking new ground musically?
That is the question. It's also subjective, right? What speaks to one person might fall flat for someone else.
Yeah, and that's what makes talking about an album like this so interesting. You get all these different takes and interpretations. There's no right or wrong answer, really. Totally. So to sum up our artist spotlight on Missionary, we've got a pretty complex album here. It's polished, nostalgic. It's got that wild mix of guests. It's definitely starts some serious debate.
Yeah, it's got people talking. That's for sure. You've got some praising Dre's production, but others saying it's too slick. Then you've got Snoop doing his thing, those classic laid-back verses. But some people want more, And then there are those features like, wow, Sting on a Snoop Dogg album. That's an image I won't forget.
I know, right? It's a lot to process. So after hearing all of this, after all these different perspectives, I have to ask, did any of this make you want to listen to Missionary?
You know what? It did. I'm definitely curious. I want to hear those Dre beats for myself, see if they're too polished or just... Right. I want to hear Snoop's verses, too. See if I hear consistency or if I think he's playing it safe.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm kind of morbidly curious about that Sting collaboration, too.
I'm right there with you. I think this artist spotlight gave us a really good way to think about this album. We know what to listen for, what the big arguments are. It's like a roadmap for our ears.
Exactly. It's like you're not just listening to the music anymore. You're engaging with it on a whole new level.
So what did you think of our artist spotlight on Missionary? Did it make you want to check it out? Let us know. Thank you for joining us. Please come back again for another exciting episode. Please look for more from our guest on all streaming platforms. This episode of Behind a Rhythm was produced by Ant Taylor for the Bay Play Radio and Sonic Dumbo Radio Network. And as always, have fun, be kind, and be well. Until next time, we are out.